How's it going, guys? Today we are going to be looking at the Somogear NGAL. Now, why am I doing this? Honestly, it is purely out of frustration for lack of a detailed initial review of this thing. If you're like me, I'm sure you'd rather not spend $4,000 on a laser aiming module that you have no way to get warranty for because it's a gray market item. And the thought of even a $450 laser sounds like a decent deal with the assumption that it performs. So right here is a reenactment, so I don't rob you of the joy of unboxing your very own airsoft toy. So I have already used this before, so this is probably not how it actually came, but just want to give you an idea of what came right out of the box with mine. You got your LA23 style switch, nice and clicky. So pretty tactile. For those that don't know, LA23 style plugs are not going to be the same as something like a a PEC 15 plug. You will need a separate switch. So if you've invested in switches, sorry, you're going to need to get some new stuff. A little screwdriver for your adjustments. Here's an M-lock attachment. You do get 2 sets of stickers, which I found kind of interesting, and your M-lock hardware, Allen wrenches, etc. What did not come with mine is the pick and tinny attachments needed to secure this. So there's a testament to some of those quality control issues. And then airsoft toy, I think most of you guys know why they include that. And then the PCB potted, we'll take their word for it. But nonetheless, I don't want to spend too long on that. I'm sure most of you are interested in the unit itself. So just taking a quick look, it is a pretty solid unit. All aluminum, feels pretty good. Let's do a little bit of Somogear ASMR for you guys. So I think you get the idea. Pretty good switches. Everything is nice and tactile. Nothing feels loose. Even the focus knob, I thought it was going to feel really loose and kind of crappy. It's pretty tight. Now, I don't know if I'd want to bang this really hard on something. I have yet to do that, but that would be the only issue I'd be concerned with since it is protruding from the body, but everything feels pretty solid. The finish, and I've mounted this, we'll get into what I've done to it later in the video. You can see the finish is scraping pretty much right off. So if that bothers you, then something to know. I will say the only thing right out of the box that is a piece of junk on this unit is this rubber battery lanyard that as you either try to loosen or tighten, it just totally binds up. It's purely on here right now just to show you how it comes out of the box, but let's celebrate together. Now that you guys have seen it, this thing will never be on my unit again. So just cheap rubber that's definitely going to rip. It's getting in the way. So there you have it. Making sure that battery is out so I don't ruin my nice camera sensor with the lasers. All you guys that like to shine lasers at your cameras, I hope you know that can take out pixel rows on your sensor. So you have the stacked Vis and IR laser and then the laser illuminator. You can see all the hardware has been filled in with epoxy of some sort, including the screws on the outside, although they claim it is not waterproof. So a slight upgrade from the PEC 15. This is an all plastic housing. I think these screws, there's been many people taking these apart on YouTube where these screws are basically just kind of shallow and embedded in the plastic body. Now we have an aluminum body that those screws are going into, but it looks like this locking bar does kind of go into this aluminum casing too. So I'm hoping that takes a decent amount of stress off the actual body itself, but I guess only time will tell. And for those that may not otherwise be aware, the size difference between the two, substantially smaller. Takes up less space on the rail for sure. Now on the body you can see these two little grooves here. behind that screw, and that is where the actual clamping mechanism has some indexes for that. So when you are trying to mount it to a rail section, you need to make sure that those are actually properly aligned. Otherwise, it's not going to sit flat and you're going to have issues on pretty much every rail section. So full disclosure. Now, it has worked on most of my setups, but here's an example of where I have to disclose to you guys it does not tighten all the way. Now, there's been some early reports of rail fitment issues, so you can see I have it indexed. There's those little pins that are on this mounting hardware that make it have to index a certain way. I first hand tighten it. You'll see that there's still noticeable play. Now, typically, if you then kind of take it quarter to half turn, it locks up pretty good. But here is one of my hand guards that it just never fully tightens. So beware of that. All the other ones, even if it goes hand tight and it has ever so slightly a little bit of play like this, once I do that quarter to half turn with the screwdriver, on all my other hand guards, it completely gets rid of all the play. But full disclosure, I've seen some people talking about this, and I have experienced it on this hand guard. This is one of the OG BCM KMRs. What I will do, let's see if we remove this washer, if it makes a difference, because I know some of you guys are going to ask. Same amount of play there. No, so removing the washer did not make a difference. I wanted to also test the co-alignment or lack thereof of the visible and IR aiming lasers on this unit. And here's my group of 5, including this nasty flyer for the vis laser. Kind of shooting free-handed 25 yards. This is the group I got. It is what it is. And here was the IR aiming laser. So you'll notice this one's a little bit left. This one is pretty much right where it was zeroed, other than that flyer. But I didn't really think this was the best representation because, again, freehanding it, shooting in the dark can be a little bit difficult. The IR laser, even on low at 25 yards, was kind of overpowering my night vision, and I didn't want to risk burning the tubes over testing out a Chinese clone. So what I did is, in a more controlled environment at 15 yards, I simply marked where the vis laser was, so put it right on center here, and then marked the IR through the night vision. And this stayed consistent. I repeated it 3 times, and I saw it was a very consistent offset each time, so I called that group of 3 good. The vertical offset makes sense to me, given the distance of the lasers vertically on the unit, again, only at 15 yards. That made sense. What's a little concerning is that the IR laser is also about a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch to the right at 15 yards. So the further away I go, obviously that's probably going to drift further and further as those lasers diverge. What I will need to do is kind of revisit this and see if these drift any further. So I'll annotate this, I'll mark the round count and the date this was done. And once I get to 500 to 1,000 rounds to this unit, potentially, we'll revisit this and see what it looks like. Now, I just want to reiterate again that the reason I'm doing this with such a low round count, I just wanted to share my initial thoughts and experiences with this because I didn't see a ton of detailed or analytical information out there, and I didn't know if this is even going to be worth my time. So I wanted to know if right out of the gate if it's going to have issues, and it's, there you go, done deal, case closed. But so far, I think this is still potentially viable, and just sharing the initial look at the Somogear NGAL. Now, the million-dollar question. Can the Somogear NGAL hold 0? Well, there was only one way to find out. So first things first, I went ahead and got it effectively zeroed at roughly 25 yards. And after doing so, I went ahead and started shooting groups. First, roughly a group of 20 or so rounds, just to make sure that it was even worth my time to continue further down the rabbit hole, investigating if this was a worthwhile or not product. So as I continued on with the range day, just running my typical drills and training while having the laser mounted, sometimes using it to aim and sometimes just exposing it to the recoil and extreme heat coming from the handguard while shooting in rapid succession, I just continued about my business per usual, periodically checking the 0. Now, after an initial 60 rounds, I did verify that the 0 was still good to go. Although I noticed that it was slightly shifted left and was most likely because I was at a different shooting angle. I made sure to better mark my shooting position for future zero re-verifications. Nonetheless, this is what I was experiencing. So I continued on with my range day. I then shot another 50 rounds and did another 10 round group to confirm the zero. At no point in the process did I try to retighten the hardware. Even if I thought that there was a shift in zero, I did not make any adjustments to the windage or elevation. Now the handguard was getting extremely hot to the point that I needed to wear gloves because it was so uncomfortable, and the barrel was smoking hot as well. I fired one final 10 round group to see if the zero had shifted, and then went downrange to take a closer look. So let's go ahead and talk about the initial use of the Somogear NGAL. This was my initial 4-round group. I then used my point of aim with where the laser was to then tweak it up. This was more or less a confirmation. I then just clicked it up a couple more times, seeing that I could shift just a little bit. Now, when I'm talking about, so these were zeroing. The rest of the groups are me confirming zero, and I am shooting from only 25 yards. I'm not super far, and I'm off a tripod. So I'm not doing bench rest shooting. I am at least resting the rifle on something to try to get rid of that human error, but that is the setup. And this to me doesn't seem like it's shifted. It's within 1 inch margin. Again, I'm not shooting off a bench rest, but I'm trying to get rid of some of the human error, just trying to go through the paces. And by the way, for both of these groups, the handguard was very hot to the touch. The barrel, I couldn't even touch without it burning my finger. So as far as what this unit is seeing, it's seeing all the recoil, it's seeing a bunch of heat. I did this in rapid succession, kind of rushing through it, because I'm honestly just curious. Now 130 rounds through this unit. So far, zero issues. The laser has not cut off once, but we're only shooting out of a 10.5 inch 5.56 platform. I'm gonna go ahead and put it on something different next. Now, I essentially repeat the exact same process using my 9mm SBR as a host, and don't be fooled, even though 9mm sounds like it's lesser recoil than the 5.56 cartridge used earlier, this is not a direct impingement system. It is a recoil blowback system where it's a lot snappier, a lot more perceived recoil. And you can see I'm not being gentle, I'm making sure things heat up, and I'm really trying to put it through its paces. No issues whatsoever. And the laser didn't flicker or turn off once. In fact, I had pre-purchased some O-rings after reading some forums that that's a potential recoil fix, but I didn't have to use or install them at all. I fired a total of 100 rounds, once again checking my zero periodically after running drills and doing some plinking. And I was pretty happy to see that the zero overall did not really seem to shift, especially since I am not doing any kind of precision shooting. I'm just leaning the rifle on a tripod to check the zeros. Not using precision optics, using loose bulk 9mm ammo. Keep that in mind, guys. So this is what I call it zeroed. So once again, not precision shooting, but I'd call that a pretty good group for 25 yards just resting on something. These here are all our final zero confirmations, 10 round groups each. I rushed through these three. This one, although I would still call it a fairly tight group, it looked like it was drifting a little left, so I wanted to shoot one last group a little slower. I'd still say it's maybe a little left compared to some of these other groups, but that is what I got. I would still call that fairly retained in terms of the zero, given the way I'm shooting and aiming. It seems like it's kind of luck of the draw with some of these clone laser aiming modules, but I didn't see any detailed videos on YouTube, so this is really me satisfying my own curiosity and sharing it in hopes that someone else out there that may find this useful will appreciate me taking the time to look into this in detail. So now moving on to what most of you guys are probably interested in, and that is the nighttime performance of this Somogear NGAL. Now, a real quick administrative data point. Currently, you see a 100-yard silhouette being illuminated. I wanted to orient you to what you're going to be looking at for the comparison videos, and there's going to be another silhouette at 25 yards that's kind of on the left of the screen in the dark area right now. The brush that's being illuminated is 50 yards, and the tree that you can just barely make out to the right of that illuminated brush is at 90 yards from the view of this PVS-14. Now, this was a completely moonless night. It was extremely dark, and because of that, I have the PVS-14 gain turned almost all the way down. The reason being that if I would have had the gain turned up, the auto gating would have taken the average environment and all the IR bounce back, and it would have completely washed out the IR illuminator and lasers, as that would have been a really, really bright hotspot in the middle of the otherwise dark environment. So although it looks like it leaves something to be desired with all the illuminators I'm going to show you, to the user's eye, not being seen through a camera where things are lost in translation, they look phenomenal, and you can even illuminate the tree line at 500 yards. So keep this in mind and know that it is a true baseline between all the illuminators you're going to look at. If one appears brighter in this really, really dark view, it is substantially brighter when you're looking at it directly. So that was a lot, but you needed to be oriented in terms of what is happening and what you're looking at. Okay, this is going to be the Somogear NGAL. This is dual low, and the target you see right there that I'm currently aiming at is at 25 yards. So this is as wide as it gets at 25, and I will pan over here, and I'm not sure if we're going to be able to see it. Right there is a silhouette at 100. We go ahead and tighten this beam, so now when it's tight you can see it. There is virtually no moon, guys. This is complete pitch black, so I'm going to widen this illuminator again. And just wanting to point out, I mean, it is a super clean illuminator. Looks really, really good. Let's see. Fortunately, I guess I can't just do illuminator low. So there's aim high. There's illumination high. So again, stupid clean. And you can, even in the wide spill, see that 100-yard silhouette, but as I focus it, you can absolutely see that silhouette. So now here's dual high. You can definitely tell that you're hitting and bouncing back on that target. So pretty solid. Very impressed. Now the tree line that you see back there is 400 to 450 yards depending on the angle. So getting a little bit of illumination on that tree line. Now for comparison purpose, here is the PEC 15. So I'll go as wide as possible. PEC, again, Somogear, full power-ish. And we'll focus it as much as I can. Definitely a lot more focusable. So that 100-yard silhouette. And in case you guys are wondering if this new batch of Somogears are not actually full power, the laser looks the same to my eyes, guys, so obviously it's not perfectly co-aligned. That illuminator is better. They look about the same. So NGAL on the left, PEC 15 on the right, in terms of power output, and just overall strength of the lasers. To my eyes, they look pretty much identical. NGAL on the left. I'm trying to look at that 100-yard target. So the PEC gets a lot tighter. I can see them both. Both look pretty good to me. And then coming back to this 25-yard target, let me widen them. .25 yards. This is still high. PEC isn't perfectly aligned, but you get the idea. NGAL on the left, PEC on the right. So there's a full power A2. 100 yards. Full power A2 on the left. I mean, I find that the full power lasers are too much. I wish I could do a low power laser with the full power illuminator, but you know how that goes. So real full power A2 on the left and the NGAL on the right. You see that nasty petri dish effect that a lot of people don't like, just because of the type of laser illuminator it is. It is what it is. When you're trying to buy these real mil-spec ones, you don't exactly get to pick from everything unless you have unlimited money. Look how clean the Somogear one is to the right. And power-wise, I'd say they're equivalent, just so much cleaner on the Somogear. So really wanted to show that. But last and definitely not least, this is the Armasight Watchman, which is a V-cell based illuminator. So it can go so narrow that it almost becomes a laser beam, and super wide, but very clean. And this is on the lowest power setting, by the way. So even on the widest setting, I mean, it blows laser based illumination out of the water. You can see a little bit more strength, a little more concentrated illumination, the laser, when it's at the widest setting, but not a fair comparison considering that I can make this one so much more narrow. So just trying to show you guys what you can get in other form factors. So there you have it, an initial look at the Somogear NGAL. I will definitely be posting updates as the round count goes up. Speaking of which, huge shout out to Stand One Armory for assisting in the round count of this video, as well as Armasight for providing the night vision that was obviously also important for evaluating this laser aiming module. Thanks for stopping by, guys, and as always, have a good one.